Very nice.
Very nice.
Yes, and this, I believe, this music was composed by Illyra the Free.
Woo!
Yeah, we're going to talk about some the possibility of some doom music in my future.
Yes.
Anyway,
Fun times.
yeah. So now we are up to Psalm 81. Not quite yet to Psalm 82. This is the prequel to the. I never mind. I will let Lawrence explain.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, Psalm 82 is the best psalm because I don't know, a lot of Christians don't like it. I wonder why. Of course, over time. I mean, I'll you know what? I'll talk about it more when we get there because we're not even there yet. But Psalm 82 is great. It's just polytheistic. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
You could put it under the banner of henotheistic, but whatever. It is far more explicit in such as theology than other texts.
I'm just looking at my NIV translation. Yeah, I know. And I love how they put gods in like passive aggressive quotes that I am certain have absolutely no linguistic justification.
A lot of the time they also translate it as angels.
Uh-huh.
That's how the Greeks translated it in the Septuagint, I think.
The cope is real.
But yeah, I know exactly. They cope real hard with this one. But either way, yeah, we can before we hop into Psalm 81, I
noticed that we haven't. I don't see the panel on Peter's screen.
Oh right, yeah, he hasn't switched over. Yeah,
Peter. Our illustrious fans wish to behold us in all of our glory.
Behold,
behold.
The thing about Peter is, like, I understand in his old age, you know, he can't really remember these things as well. But there is like, I have been working on a commentary on Matthew for a while now. And because I basically just want to do, I know, Tomer, relax.
A while.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I think I made a new discovery. So I am currently having it looked over. And then once I am at least a bit more confident in it, in this new observation in Matthew, then I'll probably publish on it. But I do want to share it. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's you know, my brain is weird and I memorize weird things. Well, the Matthew videos were something I watched when I was a Christian, which means at one point I pretty much had the entire Gospel of Matthew memorized in the NIV version, including the little bit at the beginning with the list of names. That was
the genealogy.
Super funny. Yeah, well, genealogies are hilarious.
Yeah, I will say that my discovery, if it is in fact a discovery, my observation, we'll put it that way. My observation is about the genealogy. So yeah. It'll really only be interesting to Tomer, and that's only if it were in Hebrew. So either way, we can I think we can hop into Psalm 81 unless someone has something else going on. I guess no one does, and Arn is muted.
Arn does in the side chat.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second.
Those comments.
Let's see. Shut up, Matt says, panel, beyond the Hegseth/Tarantino verses, any other known variants scripture of Psalms used by military regiments?
Variant?
Shit the Bible does not say.
Pete Hegseth wanted to quote the Bible for his warmongering, and he apparently couldn't find anything in the actual Bible, so he used a Quentin Tarantino quote. Remember that Samuel L. Jackson? And I will lay there with furious. I am the Lord. Yeah. Well, there was another, like, it was from that Quentin Tarantino world, and basically he quoted the guy who made Kill Bill rather than the Bible, but Bible sounding. So surely
Yeah, fake
someone
Bible
with
quote.
2 whole functioning brain cells and slightly less alcoholism has in fact managed to find an actual Bible quote.
Yeah,
to
good
use for
old
such
Pete
purposes.
Keg's breath over there. Just a real piece of shit, that guy.
And then
Oh
shut up. Matt says, no, wait, oh, there's another
no,
one.
the question is genuinely if
No,
there's any other
that was
common use. I think.
It didn't copy, but
it
so
was a double
it was
quote.
it should have been the first 50, Arn.
Should have been the first 50.
From Illyra.
From Illyra.
I don't see that on here.
No, that's what I said. It didn't copy.
It didn't
Okay.
copy into the side chat.
Okay, so Allura the Free gave 50 Aron Ra gift memberships.
Yes.
She's awesome.
Yep, thank you very much. And we shall talk now that I know that she has this capability. We will talk about like 45-second musical piece. I don't want much. I just want something that has a heavy, slow foot stomping Godzilla footstep drums, and the guitars to sound like kaiju fighting. You
just want the drama. Old living dinosaur starter thing. That was really where you had the stomping of and then it's the parrot.
Yeah, I like music that's a little scary. Sound like a horror theme.
It has the vibe. It has the dramatic vibe.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy with a house full of snakes and big spiders says he likes scary music. That tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try to contain your shock.
Yeah, my wife, I can see it now. My wife got me a tiny baby. By tiny baby, I mean this big.
Your baby.
Yeah, a tiny baby, massive, fluffy, giant Colombian bird-eating spider. Yeah, like the biggest spider in the world, and I have a baby of that, and it's already this big around. Yeah. Anyway, where did I put? There it is. Psalm 81. Sing it. Okay, you want a title, don't you? To the leader, God's appeal to stubborn Israel.
That's not it.
No, that's what it says.
Remember,
That's not it.
there's the heading that
Yes.
the translators give it to give like
Yes.
a topic summary, and then there is like a title that was given by the scribes.
Okay.
For the
So,
director of music.
It says, Psalm 81, next line says, God's appeal to stubborn Israel, because
Yes.
Israel's stubborn, I guess.
And then the
And then-
next line.
And then to the leader, according to the Gittith
Gittith, yes.
of Asaph.
Close enough.
Sing aloud to God our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Raise a song. Sound the tambourine, the sweet lyre with the harp. Blow the trumpet at the new moon, to the full moon on our festal day. For it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. He made it a decree in Joseph when he went out over the land of Egypt. I hear a voice I had not known. I relieved you, shoulder of the burden. Your hands were freed from the basket. In distress you called, and I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah, Selah. Hear, O my people, why I admonish you, O Israel. If you would but listen to me, there shall be no strange God among you. You shall not bow down to a foreign God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it.
I bite.
But my people did not listen to my voice. Israel would not submit to me, even though I pushed its head down and everything. So I gave them over to the stubborn hearts to follow their own counsels. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him, and their doom would last forever. I would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with the honey from the rock I would satisfy you. Wink, wink.
So clearly, in verse 16, we have a reference to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his honey, which is great.
Not how I interpreted that.
Oh, that's how I interpreted it. Yeah.
That might have been a bit of wishful thinking on your part, Lawrence.
I mean, what else could honey from the rock be? Would you not be glazed by the honey of the rock if you had the choice?
Oh, Lord, anoint me.
The most electrifying man in the Bible. Yeah.
In fairness, I was told a funny story by a mentor of mine that involved this verse that was not creepy and perverted. Apparently, when she was in Bible school, she had one of those. There's a lot of different things they'll try and make you feel guilty about and give speeches about how you should be doing this if you really cared. And one of the trends that goes through periodically is if you really love God, you'll give him your best hours, not your worst, because your first waking thought should be of God. So anyway, she's not a morning person like me. And but someone did this whole guilt running bullshit. And so she woke up really early and was like studying and then fell asleep with the Bible on her face. And she drooled. And there was a line of drool that literally went to the line, open your mouth that I may fill it. The Bible like half on her face. She was like, okay, fine. Stupid bullshit guilt thing. So yeah, that was funny.
I mean, I didn't really go into length with this verse because my extensive commentary was on Psalms 82. Though I do note that, Tate notes that this immediately suggests one whose mouth is to be filled with good food and drink, and that the idea may not be missing entirely, since verse 70c could follow naturally after 11c. Open wide your mouth and I will fill it, and with honey from the rock I will satisfy you. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this one is pretty self-explanatory. Kind of calls back to the stay in Egypt, of course. In fact, it uses the very common phrase that is used to identify this specific God. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And this is used, of course, for both the golden calf narrative and for the for Jeroboam's golden calves. So, or these are the gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt in that case. And in this one, in this psalm, you can kind of see why they had to identify it, because there were essentially in some way, other gods competing for relevance and the position of either high god or your foreign gods who were becoming popular, which is why in verse 9, right before we have the specific identification, we have a callback to the commandment, there shall be no, I mean, it's not a direct quotation, but there shall be no strange god among you. You shall not bow down to a foreign god, which is very similar to the commandment. And it makes sense because earlier on in verses 4 through 5, for it is a statute. For it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. He made it a decree in Joseph, which is he made a decree in Joseph when he went over the land of Egypt. So we have the callbacks to Old Testament stuff, Waters of Meribah included.
Yeah, in my generation, it was an invasion of British gods, but now I understand the kids are listening to Korean gods.
That is true.
I thought they were listening to Korean demon hunters.
Oh, and I did have to just make sure everyone noticed this. In verse 7, in distress you called, and I rescued you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. Very obvious allusion to God's existence in storm clouds.
Or
and
he was hooking up
God
with Thor.
To God's secret place where he makes thunder.
Well,
Maybe
where
he
thunders
was
happen,
hooking
so it's
up
a
with
storm.
Thor.
He might have been, yeah. So this is his position as a storm god and how he communicates using storms.
Yeah, and if you want to hear his thunder, pull his finger.
Yeah, I'd much rather hook up with Chris Hemsworth than pull God's finger. Thanks.
All right, so Shut Up, Matt says, Aaron, I was thinking of the British para-regiments. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil because I'm the scariest mofo there. Are there any other examples?
That is hilarious. I love that.
Yeah. And then
I think you'd have to ask servicemen.
And then someone named Dr. Kip Davis said, damn it, I missed the memo.
What memo?
The link is there, Kip. You can still join. No one's stopping you. The only thing that's stopping you, Kip, is the fact that you don't believe in yourself enough to do it. But I believe
power was inside you all along.
He says he saw it now, so who knows?
He might be able to hop in for a minute. See?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we can't do
you
minutes.
should, because we're about to go over Psalm 82, Kip.
You know what? I'm going to volunteer to read Psalm 82 so you boys can discuss it at length. How does that sound? Or do you want to fight me for the right to read it?
I'm thinking if I want to do, I don't have the energy for some fucking character, so it won't particularly be interesting for that. No, yeah, I guess you can take this one.
Okay.
Someone in chat said, I mean, Dr. Kip Davis is a Calgary Flames fan. Don't expect too much. I don't know what that means. Maybe Lilith can...
Point.
I think it's a sports ball reference.
I think so.
No. Sports puck.
Oh. Okay.
He's a Canadian. What did you expect? Good God. Anyway. Yes. Keep an eye on the Flames. But in any event, do we want to go ahead and read 82 or
I have the overview commentary
for the 81?
Yes,
I figured. Okay.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's right. Maybe we should introduce it a little bit more.
Yes. So scholars have generally divided Psalms 81 into two sections: verses 2 through 6b, generally labeled as a hymnic festal summons, and verses 6c through 17, generally labeled as an oracle. Tate notes that there is a wide agreement that Psalms 50, 81, and 95 are psalms which reflect festival settings, and were most probably recited on such occasions, probably being composed for use in them. He writes that the primary psalm reflected by the texts is almost certainly that of the autumn festival of booths or tabernacles. Gerstenberger writes that the preaching and interpreting Israel's past history in the light of scripture reading is an intrinsic part of the early Jewish community worship. He writes that official preachers, who are not to be confused with prophets, must have taken care of this congregational function. Tate notes that scholars have long suggested that Psalms 81 originated in worship circles of the northern Israelite tribes. He writes that the reference to Jacob and Joseph are suggestive of this, as is the reference to Meribah, which may represent a variant tradition from those in Exodus 17, 1-7, Numbers 20, 1-13. He writes that if this psalm originated in northern circles of worship, it probably dates from the period prior to 722 BCE. He writes, however, that the psalm's present form and position in the Asaph collection point toward exilic and post-exilic contexts. Hosfeld argues that verses 2 through 5 should be dated to the pre-exilic period for 3 reasons. 1. The makeup of the orchestra in verses 3 and 4, tambourine, lyre, harp, and shofar, which is older than the comparable arrangement in Psalms 98, 5, and 6, harp, trumpet, and shofar. 2. The order of the festivals, new moon and full moon, which betrays no influence of the weekly Sabbath that was a matter of course after the exile, as in the late festival calendar in Ezekiel 46 and Leviticus 23 and Numbers 28 and 29. 3. The paired concept of mishpat and chok in the reason for call to praise in verse 5 appears as an expression for legal ordinances 4 more times in the singular. Exodus 15:25, Joshua 24:25, 1 Samuel 30:25, and Ezra 7:10. It is probable that the first 3 passages all date from before the exile. The older singular form was replaced by the plural used from the time of Deuteronomy 12:1 and 26:16 and appearing in many legal influence texts. That's it.
And yeah, this one this is when it comes to any kind of polytheism or henotheism in the Bible, this should be like the very first stop, because we have hints of a divine council in many texts. We have hints of other gods in many texts, but this one makes it far more explicit. It is like it's actually fascinating. You can tell the well, essentially, yeah, the ancient Near Eastern or Canaanite background here, because it all goes back to that, because of the words that he uses. So after we read it, we'll get more into it. But it's fucking awesome.
Does that mean I can go ahead and read 82?
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Psalm 82, a psalm of Asaph, wherein God is a dramatic bitch. Selah. God presides in the great assembly. He gives judgment amongst the gods. Sorry, gods. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. But you will die like mere men. You will fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, and judge the earth. For all the nations are your inheritance.
Yeah, how cool is that? How polytheistic is this shit? Okay, so
Super poly. It's
Right.
just, my God's going to beat you all.
right, yeah, not my favorite form of poly, but it is a great form of poly. So, God is in the divine council, and what's used here is it uses Elohim for the name of God, and then he's also among the Elohim, the other gods. But that second reference has always been taken as angels, because of course Elohim can mean just divine beings in general. But because of what he's actually asking them to do, they are just other gods. They are other deities in a divine council. And this goes directly back to Canaanite mythology, where Baal is the head of this council of gods, where you have a meeting place of deities, and he commands from there. And
Right.
the actual
And he took the throne from his father El.
well, yeah, but the thing is, we kind of get a very interesting one of those older titles too. We get in verse 6, I say you are gods, children of the Most High. Which of course was the way to designate. It's usually, of course, like El Elyon is how
Mhm.
like it would usually be seen. And hold on, what is that? That's verse 6, right? And it does use Elyon there.
Yes.
So just the Most High. Um, there is like the actual request, right? He's like every god has been given their portion. Once we go, like if we take into account like Deuteronomy 32:8-9, for example, every god's been given their portion. They basically have their own domains, and this god is like, you know, the initial Elohim is the one that is like their boss. He is the Most High. He's at the top of this council. And he's like, hey, listen, all of your people fucking suck. Why can't they not suck? Can they not suck, please? And that's his essential criticism, which is why at the end the psalmist is saying, "Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations belong to you." Like you're the guy in charge. You
And
can fix this.
that's a distinction from earlier forms of henotheism, because you see in that one argument with what, I don't know, one of the tribes, when they're like, why should you not take the land your God Chemosh has given to you, and we will take the land that our God Yahweh has given to us. We referred earlier to the mythology where the high God El gives to each of the Elohim a portion. This God is to rule over this land. There was the original polytheism was very much bound in with the natural world. It's this locale based, this is the god of this mountain, this is the god of this area, this is the god you must appeal to because it's his ground and he's responsible, so you have to like make friends with the local deity. And then you see in the psalms dedicated to the Exodus, how can we sing the gods of Yahweh in a foreign land? This does have hints, although far from fully formed, but leading into that henotheistic idea that no, our God is really the supreme over all these others, and has the right to hold them to account, as opposed to being a member of the council with their own area of responsibility and the natural limit set on that.
Yeah. So the idea behind the henotheism or the monolarity, it appears as both terms, is that all these other gods exist. But only one is worthy of worship. And the thing is, you have local manifestations of these deities, sometimes even of the same deity that is just a local emanation of it, which is why we have in like some archaeological evidence would point to like, oh, here is like Yahweh of Teman, and then I forget the other one.
Shomron, Samaria.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's right. Yahweh of Samaria. Yes, thank you. So we have these local manifestations of deities, and that happened in like every culture ever, where
Oh yeah.
you would have these, like, think about Hera, for example, the Greek goddess Hera. In most manifestations, Hera was not warlike, right? Hera was not known for war, but there was one island on which they worshipped Hera that, because of their own needs at the time, they did start worshiping Hera as a war goddess. So, like, there are local manifestations of these deities that are meant to address the concerns of the community there. Uh, so this happened in every culture that had that's polytheistic, and in this one, it's very clear that you have Elohim, this one god who would, of course, later be associated as or later be called Yahweh, right? Um, this deity was the guy ruling this region, and all of these other gods are subordinate. And uh, in fact, there's a criticism of them that the gods have neither knowledge nor understanding. Um,
Mhm.
so I think this is so fucking cool that we have a very clear polytheistic text.
Absolutely.
And I noted earlier that a lot of translations will use angels instead of gods there because it fits them better theologically. They're like, well, we know they're divine, but surely they can't be other gods because there are no other gods. So those translations, the Septuagint specifically, speaks to a later time where they're adding their own interpretive twist to this text, and that happened not only in this case but in other cases where they talk about other Elohim. There is very common the translation of just angels because they want to make them
Welcome,
subordinate
Kip.
to this deity. Yes,
Thank
hello,
you.
They
Kip.
do. But this, I was going to say, like, yeah, they want to make them subordinate, but this demonstrates an actual point of transition in the claim to supremacy, because every god could be said to be supreme in their own region, just as, you know, everyone should respect show them respect when you're in their house, so they're in charge because it's their house, kind of a thing. Even if you're stronger than them, you're supposed to be, you know, respectful when you're in someone else's house. It's not your house. But they are claiming this for God for all things, that it's all his, he should be the final and supreme rule. It's not just by might, it's by right, which granted, there's not a lot of distinction in those sometimes, but this one is the start of that claim, moving towards a claim of, you know, no,
So
my part isn't just Israel, it's everything.
So this place where all the gods meet, is that like the League of Super Friends?
I think
If it helps you to understand it that way, yes.
Sure.
Or is it more like the 27th floor?
I don't know what any of these things mean, so I can't.
I do not know the
also
27th
lost.
floor reference. I was going to say the Legion of Doom.
Floor where the boys meet. The show. The
Oh,
I
right.
haven't watched it.
Regrettably, yeah, it's probably more like that.
Yeah, that's probably pretty good, pretty close. Except, like in, I mean, I've seen in a handful of interpretations of what's going on in the drama of Psalm 82 is that El's presence in this is much more hands-off than Homelander. So,
well, he does tend to Homelander does tend to blow up people with his eyes a little more directly, whereas God does seem to outsource.
Yeah, God needs all these other people to do his work for him, because I don't know, blinking or wiggling his nose or snapping his fingers is too hard.
Hey, he just doesn't have the muscle control to wiggle his nose, and you shouldn't judge him for that.
Okay.
yeah. So, sorry, I missed all the preamble, and I was distracted. I'm still in my goddamn pajamas, but
At least
can't
your
tell.
pajamas have been damned by God, but
And at
much
least-
like the rest of us.
At least his
That's true.
pajamas also include a hat. So
well, I don't.
if it helps you to sleep like
I
that.
don't-
That is
Well,
a
he's
two.
Canadian. I think they're required to wear a toque, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, we are, and it is a cool and an overcast day today, so it's fitting.
Okay.
But yeah.
By the way, I saw some comment in the chat about Alira the Fury, the music we were talking about. Alira, I just sent you an email explaining that all I want you to do is combine Judas Priest with Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, the Scorpions, and Metallica to do an instrumental heavy metal horror movie soundtrack of ranting, stomping kaiju in combat.
Yeah, small request.
Boy,
Yeah, Illyra,
like
he is
the
a
sound of
silly
that.
boy. Do not let him make you nervous.
Okay.
did you all talk about any of the specifics yet?
I guess how specific.
Well, I
in
just
the-
read
in
it,
the text?
so
Oh, okay,
82.
you
Let's
just read
go.
it, right?
Listen,
Okay.
I haven't started my. I haven't
You
started
haven't
the commentary.
your commentary. Okay, I'll save it for that. So
Oh, so should I start?
yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'll start with the
Good with it.
yeah. So I'll start with the overview. Wait, is that like... Sorry, I just need to check something real quick. No, okay. So Psalms 82 is one of the psalms that has received the attention of many scholars. Tate writes that the main reason is that there is no other psalm like it, and even since Gunkel, it has been defined as having a prophetic character. Mowinckel described it as, quote, a peculiar mixing of psalm and oracle, where the oracle is the chief thing but is organically fitted into a short prayer, end quote. Gerstenberger notes that the concept of gods acting among a pantheon of deities was apparently common throughout Israel's history, in spite of later monotheistic restrictions of any polytheistic models. He writes that the action described in our psalm seems to have been put, quote, on stage, unquote, by the speaker in a worship service. Therefore, he labels the psalm as a report of trial or even an enactment of trial. Zenger notes that the ambivalence on the level of events that appears in the psalm has led to its being subjected to three different types of interpretations. 1. The psalm announces the death of the gods of the nations because they do not fulfill their duty of accomplishing right and justice on earth, and it proclaims Yahweh as the only true God. 2. The psalm condemns in alienating language human judges, quote-unquote, officials or kings who misuse their office. 3. The psalm expresses a powerful social critique, in that it reveals the antisocial behavior of the Canaanite officialdom as the consequence of their adherence to the Canaanite religion, and at the same time combats such behavior in the name of the Yahweh religion. Regarding the dating, Terrien wrote that the psalm is probably ancient, quote-unquote, and presents a satire of the syncretism that many of the early settlers favored when they learned agriculture from the Canaanites. Tate notes that Ackermann argued that the psalm originated in liturgies of the tribal league and was used later in the liturgies of the monarchy and in New Year celebrations of the post-exilic period. Tate writes that this position is based on the archaic nature of the psalm's language, its probable Canaanite prototype, and its place in the history of Israelite religion with the development of Yahweh as the supreme God. However, he notes that most commentators prefer a later date, preferably the late monarchy period, around the time of Deutero-Isaiah, such as Kimchi, Youngling, Gonzalez, Jeremias, and Krauss. He himself writes that Psalms 82 is more likely a literary composition which has dependence on the preaching of the prophets, rather than being a, quote, prototype of cultic prophetic proclamations of justice, end quote, and writes that it is probably from a later date. He notes that Morgenstern concluded that the psalm belongs to a date of circa 500 to 475 BCE, which is, quote, still a good guess, end quote. Zenger writes that Psalms 82 is linked so closely and in so many ways with the whole of the Asaph collection that, accordingly, the background of its origin can be limited to the early post-exilic epoch. He writes that this dating is also favored by its closeness to Deuteronomy 32 and to the concept of God in Deuteronomistic theology as a whole, as well as to Deutero-Isaiah, as in Isaiah 41, 21 through 24, 43, 8 through 13, and 46, 1 and 2.
I don't see any reason why they couldn't have used a couple more arcane phrases in a hymn or psalm.
What do you mean?
Well, with the argument about the dating, they said there are more arcane language.
Right.
I mean, if they were well-known phrases, you could recycle them into later productions without necessarily copy-pasting.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time thinking when I approach this text. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking through the question of the date, except to say I think it's pretty obviously developed from what appears in the Song of Moses, which is in Deuteronomy 32, right? And like there is the development, I'm sure Tomer is going to talk about at the end of the of the text here is in the pronouncement, right, where Yahweh in Deuteronomy 32 is allotted his inheritance, which is Jacob, Israel, the people, as distinct from the other deities. Here in Psalm 82, he becomes the inheritor of the entire earth. Like all the nations are now allotted as his inheritance, and I think that's a fairly obvious nod at what's taking place in Deuteronomy 32. So some of the stuff that I suspect commentators haven't spent a lot of time on with respect to this psalm, and it's something I've been doing. I did a stream about some of this stuff recently, and the relationship between this text and a lot of the later a lot of later Hellenistic Second Temple Jewish post Hasmonean literature that we have
Hasmonean dynasty.
in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then reflected in New Testament theology, with respect to the how do I put this? I guess what later becomes like so-called two powers theology, right? There's an important text in the Dead Sea Scrolls called identified as 11Q Melchizedek, which is riffing very hard on this psalm, but then also in conversation with Daniel chapter 7. Yes, Daniel chapter 7, the Aramaic vision, which is also clearly has this text kind of in the background as it's developing this motif of the Son of Man who comes in the clouds and again takes his stand in the presence of the Ancient of Days. So and on that point too, I wanted to something else that I think is really neat, really interesting in the text here right at the beginning is that this expression here, Elohim nitzav ba'adat el, the God, the divine being, takes his stand, takes his place in the council of El. This particular verb here, nitzav, is also when I translated this text for my book, I translated this as faces off against, faces off in the council of El, in the presence of the other gods. He holds court or passes judgment, and it's pretty interesting that this is the same word that appears in a couple times in Numbers. Is it 22? I think. Numbers 22. Actually, let me just do this the easy way here. Sorry. There we go.
So when you're talking about the House of El, are you talking about both Cal and Kara?
Pardon? I missed it.
Kal-El and Kara-El.
Were you telling a joke?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
sorry.
I figured it was a joke. Okay.
It was
Yeah.
a
You can tell
reference
it's
to
a joke by the dead
Superman.
silence.
Well, in
So-
fairness, most of us were muted, but yeah, he's
Right.
referring to Superman,
Okay.
Kal-El,
Oh, I
and
got
his
it.
cousin,
Okay.
Supergirl. Para
Yeah,
El.
yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Okay. So Numbers 22. This is the same action that's taken by the angel of Yahweh when confronting Balaam and his donkey on the way to meeting the king of Balak, or the king Balak of Moab. Numbers 22:23, when I'm going to switch this to the NRSV. So Numbers 22:23, when the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the road, that's the word there, with a sword drawn in his hand. So the donkey turned off the road and went into the field. And then Balaam struck the donkey. And then again in verse 31, then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of Yahweh standing on the road with his drawn sword in his hand. And I think this is critical, because I think there's a sense within just the usage of this term here in the Psalm, that this is an adversarial posture that Yahweh is taking in the council, not at all unlike what the angel of Yahweh did when confronting Balaam, where it says that he literally was a Satan. You know, in the and I've heard
An
other
opposer.
other scholars have suggested, I think provocatively, obviously, and correctly, that this particular scene is presenting Yahweh as a Satan within the text,
Hmm.
in a confrontation
Interesting.
with
Yeah.
with the other gods in the council.
Which
So
reminds me, on Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to be in Las Vegas giving a satanic invocation.
Wonderful.
cool.
Yeah, I will be a Satan.
Well,
Very cool.
devil's advocate. At least you won't be representing Satan pro bono. I'll never forget Hitchens' comment on that, being the only person in history to officially represent the devil pro bono. Which is quite the distinction.
I'll just one
So-
one of the other things. Sorry, I'll just say one more thing, Tomer, and then you can continue. One of the other things that I think is interesting in this psalm as well, that readers need to pay close attention to, is as typical within a lot of the psalms in particular, but you also find this in the prophets, some of the more poetic texts there, is that speakers are the transition between speakers are seldom marked or identified. And that's something to sort of think through as you read this, is who's speaking, and when is somebody else now taking their turn to speak. But yeah, it's anyways.
Interesting breakdown.
Okay, so I'll start with verse 1. God is portrayed as standing in the divine assembly, in Hebrew adat el, which is taken either as, quote, in the assembly of El, according to Tanner, or in the assembly of the gods. It's in Septuagint, Vulgate, Kraus, Hosfeld, and Sengel. Tate writes that the expression is probably a frozen formula for divine council or divine assembly, borrowed from Canaanite sources. If that is the case, then it is not likely that El is used as an epithet for Yahweh. The Adat El is not equal to the Adat Yehovah, nor that it refers to the god El used over against Yahweh, with Yahweh pictured as a participant in the high god El's assembly, bringing charges against his fellow gods for their failure to provide justice. Although most traditionals interpreted Elohim as judges, except for Ibn Ezra, who took Elohim to mean angels, modern scholars take Elohim as referring to the divine beings in the assembly. Gerstenberger notes that it is interesting that God is standing up, in Hebrew nitzav, and not sitting, as befits the leader of the divine assembly. He writes that most likely the term nitzav already suggests judicial action against the culprits. Hosfeld and Zenger note that by stating that he stands, God is characterized as the prosecutor at the divine assembly, and not the presider. They write that while as a rule the judge is seated when performing his office, the parties of the suit stand before him and carry on their disputation with one another. This appears to be the case in verse 1. Yahweh stands together with the other gods in the judicial assembly before a judge, and then in verses 2 through 4 begins his charge. On verse 2, Tate writes that the expression in verse 2 seems to have been a feature of Israelite judicial procedure, as seen in 1 Samuel 22:13, 2 Samuel 1:14, and 1 Kings 2:42 and 43. He writes that the use of the question form was probably to give the person charged an opportunity to explain the offending actions. Hosfeld and Zenger note that the question presupposes the common ancient Near Eastern notion that the world is based on a divine order of law that is meant to be defended and carried out by the gods within the territories assigned to them, and on behalf of the nations that are subject to their jurisdiction, as law and justice both within the individual nations and in the common life of the nations with one another. They note that the formula, their face is lifted, can refer to legal proceedings, as in Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20. That they, with heads uplifted, quote-unquote, can permit unjustified acquittals. They note, however, that the expression can point in a much more general fashion to social and political regard, to the power of the wicked, quote-unquote, in everyday social and political life. The point of the reproach is that the gods themselves take part in the perversion of justice and misuse of power. They turn justice to injustice and proclaim injustice as justice. On 3 and 4, Krauss notes that the admonition in verses 3 and 4 echoes the basic ordinances of the Old Testament justice, as seen in Exodus 22:21, 23:6, Deuteronomy 10:18, 24:17, and 27:19. In the ancient Near East, the benevolent lawgiver and judge desire assistance for the outlawed, but the admonitions of verses 3 and 4 come from Yahweh's mouth. They occur in connection with those words and commandments in which the God of Israel looks after the defenseless. Gerstenberger notes that it is surprising that we find the poor and weak, the social outcasts, in opposition to the wicked, quote-unquote. He writes that unless the marginalized understand themselves in this psalm as the only legitimate community, in Psalms 37, we have to explain this crucial juxtaposition. And Hosfeld and Zenger comment, quote, "The newly introduced series Marginal, Needy, Marginal refers to the vast majority of ancient Near Eastern and Israelite society. These are not people who have been impoverished and disempowered by a specific misfortune, for example, orphans and widows. Instead, these are the mass of small farmers, artisans, and day laborers, in contrast to the ruling class and the great landowners. Thus, the psalm fights not merely so that the gods and the governing systems they legitimate might show special care on behalf of those marginalized by misfortune, but that the existing political systems, because of their fundamental structure of injustice, might be changed in such a way that, above all, the broad masses, quote-unquote, might thereby experience lawfulness and justice, that they might be delivered from the hand of the wicked, quote-unquote. That is, from the oppression, expropriation, and degradation they experience from the ruling and ownership class, quote-unquote." On verse 5, they neither know nor understand, they go about in darkness. Commentators assume the gods are responsible for their grievous malpractice, and verse 5 is a descriptive of resulting conditions. The verse is a general statement of what happens to all those who disregard the commands of God relating to justice and the care of the marginalized people in human society. He writes that the darkness, quote-unquote, may refer to either the darkness they brought to the lands because of their malfeasance in judgment, according to Johnson and Kinder, or that it may be what they used to cloak their deeds from the scrutiny of their sovereign, according to Ackerman, or that it may reflect their benighted nature, which has resulted from their refusal to know and understand the ways of God. Hosfeld and Zenger write that walk in darkness underscores the chaos in which the gods live, quote-unquote, and that goes forth from them. The light that is lacking to them is the light of justice or the sun of righteousness. They have no insight into justice and righteousness, and therefore they wander in darkness and create darkness, that is, injustice and evil. Tanner, however, argued that they could be the result of the gods' failure and reflect the impact of their acts on the people. She writes that it is certainly possible that they is not one or the other, but is both the gods and the people whom the acts of the gods impact.
And I also want to point out that the idea that like the darkness there is supposed to be just chaos, I feel like that's kind of that would be, how should I put this? I just feel like it's wrong because Yahweh himself is said to exist in darkness, said to be covered in darkness. So like this is
The
not like,
darkness of mystery or chaos is different from the darkness of evil, which would be more of a thing.
well, this
Yeah.
would be because it's explicitly followed by the shaking of like the foundations of the earth. That's very, to me, that is, even though it's just those two lines, it's very theophonic in nature. So
Mhm.
the darkness is very often supposed to allude to the storm cloud, the darkness of storms.
Mm.
So like there is chaos, but it's not like
Yeah.
this it's not the same chaos as like an evil god would have it. This is chaos that happens when a god appears.
Now that gives
Yeah,
me a
I would
video
agree with
idea.
that.
I would love to see the Coptic creation of God acted out
Mm.
in video with special effects.
That
You
would
know,
be cool.
where God begins his existence as an abortion that is revived, and it's the goddess of chaos, was it? I can't remember which one was involved, but there's like 2 or 3 goddesses involved in this, and then they animate or reanimate, so they have an undead abortion, and that's God. And then they all step back into the shadows so that they cannot be seen, and they let this child awaken on its own. And so God wakes up, looks around, doesn't see anybody but him, and decides that he is the only thing that exists.
Yeah, is that the Coptic one? I thought that was the Gnostic one. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I would just like to say
I mean, if
women,
Lawrence can
they have
correct
been
me,
trying to blame his BS on women forever. And no, we have no part of this. This
am I
is not
right,
our
Lawrence?
fault.
Was that the Coptic one, or is that Gnostic?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say those are
Yeah.
mutually exclusive, but uh I don't, because if it's Coptic, then it's probably from Nag Hammadi.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But that a lot of Nag Hammadi texts are Gnostic texts, so I'm not exactly sure
Okay.
which, because
Well,
you have like
I know that I was, the best of my memory, I was citing Nag Hammadi, and I just assumed that meant that it was Coptic.
sure,
So
that's fair, but the
Probably also
but there are
Gnostic.
multiple creation narratives in within those texts. Like there's so I don't remember one being under the name like the Coptic creation. I remember there being like the creation of the world, or on the creation of the world. That's a Nag Hammadi. Um, and it is Coptic, but like I said, there are other creation stories as well. So I'm not exactly sure which one.
Yeah, the creation of God is a separate thing, though. Yeah, we'll have to look into that another time
Because
because that is always been an interesting story.
the thing is, I
Um,
might have read it on my channel because I read a bunch of stuff. We read a bunch of stuff from Nag Hammadi. Um, so I'm not exactly sure which one you're referring
yeah, the
to.
reason I'd like to see it acted out in video is because it is the English translation that I found was, even though it's English, it's still confusing as fuck. That's a really hard read.
Yeah,
It's hard to make sense of what they're trying to say.
yeah, that makes sense. Even like the very good translations that we were using, like a more modern day one, was still very confusing because it's also confusing theologically is the thing, because in some of these creation stories, the like the high god, not Yahweh, that's the demiurge, the high god creates all these worlds by just thinking about himself. So like he first thinks about himself, and then now that he is looking at himself, he can interact with himself, and it gets crazy, right? But it's based off of a lot of the philosophy at the time, right? So it oh god, I remember
That is the ultimate neuroticism.
no, I know it's I forget which one it was, but there was a text that was it was almost like Inception, where you had like, oh, this is a reflection of whatever. It took us a while to actually understand what the hell they were saying, but that's even in like more modern English translations. So it's just a complicated theology and philosophy, just by
And
nature.
then we have a comment from Cameron Faber, 923. He says, "Hey, Aaron Ra, I joined American Atheists because of you, as well as was freed from religious crazy beliefs. I was indoctrinated since 2001. Thanks for your efforts. I enjoy your content." Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate that I still get messages like this after all these years. Still frequently.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we at now?
Wait a minute. There's another comment.
All right, so Alira the Free sent 50 RN Raw gift memberships. Thank you very much, Alira.
Okay, so we're still in verse 5. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. The Masoretic text reads, Yimotu kol mosdei aretz. The verb yimotu is derived from the root mem vav tet, to move or shake. The commentators generally see the shaking of the foundations of the earth as referring to the subversion of the order which sustains creation. Krauss writes that in the Old Testament, just judgment is the real substructure of the universe, the foundations of the whole of creation, seen in Psalms 96:10. He writes that the demonic power plays off the gods, call to the existence of the world into question. He writes that if we understand righteousness to be the scheme of the universe, then the existence of the world is dependent on righteous judgment. Tate, however, notes that Anderson argued that the meaning here has nothing to do with the shaking of the foundations of the earth. Rather, he uses mot for the tottering walk of a stunned or drunk person, seen in Leviticus 25:35, and the activity of the legs, seen in Psalms 17:5, 38:17, and 66:9. Anderson contends that Mosadei Aretz refers to the abode of the dead in the netherworld, and the foundations, quote-unquote, being the lower part of the physical structure of the earth.
See, that second one makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
On verse 6, Hosfeld and Zenger note that the phrase Ani Amalti is differently interpreted by translations and commentators, suggesting I thought, or I have said, or I hereby declare. They favor the third possibility as the correct one, assuming the verb to be a perfect of coincidence and reading the formula as a solemn introduction to the discourse, which then refers to the whole of the following divine speech and lends it a special weight. They further write, quote, in its first part, the divine speech alludes to Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. That is, to the idea that the individual gods are supposed to protect and accomplish the order of justice as a world order in the regions of the world assigned to them, on the instructions of the Most High, that is, as sons of the Most High. The psalm leaves vague who had given them these instructions. It seems to us that this is deliberately left open in order to exclude the idea that it had been done by an El Elyon, who, as a god superior to the God of Israel, conducts, or once conducted, the governance of the world. Neither, however, is there an insinuation that the God of Israel had made this division of the world. The psalm asserts the factual reality of the religions and gods of that epoch in order, nevertheless, to announce the end of that reality in the name of and from the God of Israel as the only true God. On verse 7, Tate notes that the judgment on the gods has some similarity to the rather widespread mythical imagery of the revolt and punishment of a god. A god could be killed if he became rebellious and failed to carry out his function, such as Kingu in Enuma Elish and Dewe'ila in Artaxerxes. He notes, however, that the claim that one god renders a whole group of gods to be mortal seems to be without parallel elsewhere. In the Old Testament, the fall of a great king is described in Isaiah 14:4-21, who had been of such high status as to think of himself as seated in the assembly of the gods, but who is now fallen down to Sheol, where he has fellowship with maggots and worms, along with his fellow tyrants, who have become as weak as he. He writes that in the case of Psalms 82, there is no indication of a challenge to divine authority, as seems to have been the case in the mythical framework of the account in Isaiah 14. He writes the descendants of mortality and deposition from high rank in Psalm 82 results from the simple failure of the gods to do their job of maintaining the welfare of the lowly and poor among human beings. He notes that in ancient thought, the concept of the gods, no longer capable of keeping their position by having them lose immortality, is reflected by the Epic of Gilgamesh. Quote, "When the gods created mankind, they set apart death for mankind, but retained life in their own hands." End quote, in 10:3-3-5. And in the Ugaritic Akhat epic, where Prince Akhat, after refusing an offer of immortality from the goddess Anat, declares, quote, "I shall die the death of all men, I too shall certainly die," end quote, in 2nd Akhat 6:26-38. And finally, on verse 8, I have verse 8. So, if you want to, is there something related to
I'll
verse
go
7, or?
after.
Okay.
I'll go after.
So, on verse 8, finally, Krauss writes that the verses 1-7 are understood to be a visionary prophetic revelation, which looks into the depth of the heavenly world and proclaims to the worshipping community the juridical activity of Yahweh. Then verse 8 would have to be understood as a spontaneous answer of the community. Gerstenberger writes that the clear petition in verse 8a urges execution of divine judgment over foreign gods and peoples. God is implored to realize his juridical power over the earth. The last phrase undergirds petition, attributing power to Israel's God. Power entails praise. Power entails praise, just as praise encompasses power. Horsford and Zenger note that the explosiveness, quote-unquote, of this petition is clear against the historical background within which it is formulated and in the context of the Asaph collection, in which the psalm has a key theological position. Quote, "The psalm makes use of the factual experiences with the non-Israelite religions Israel has encountered, especially in the two political catastrophes of 722 and 587 or 586. These political upheavals were likewise upheavals in Israel's own religion. In the uniqueness of its God Yahweh, especially since, according to the contemporary patterns of religions, the destruction of his temple literally made the God of Israel placeless, so that in 79:10, the nations could say, 'Where now is your God?' The confrontation with the powerful neighbors and their gods posed in massive fashion the question of the religio-cultural and historical place of the God Yahweh among the powerful religious systems of the surrounding world. Our psalm attempts a radical answer. The God who is apparently the loser is in fact the one true God. Here he does not merely ascend to the place of president over the international pantheon of gods, as is often said. Rather, he dissolves this whole divine pantheon and all the gods. The other religions have political power, it is true, but their gods, in the view of our psalm and in comparison to the God of Israel, are really no gods at all. And therefore they will die like human beings and be thrown down like the powerful." End quote.
Throw him to the floor.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
interesting how when you read this psalm, it's quite obvious, that it's got this like monolatro or even poly gods origin, but when I was religious, like the way that we spoke about this verse and other like this is, oh, it's just obviously it's talking about human judges, and they're just called the the assembly of God because an assembly is when you have a certain amount of judges and whatever. It's just like it's interesting how they're able to like reimagine what it says to make it make sense.
Yeah. No, and I totally get that. Like, we would have probably gone with the angel narrative, but I could also see the idea of hierarchical authority is very much what we're going with here. The king serves under God, the judges serve under the king, the kings of the earth all serve under the high God. This sort of, and part of me is torn because I appreciate that they're saying, the core of our religious observance has to be actual justice, not just putting on the show and screwing people over in the background. That's a good thing. But then it also comes up with this exact same, everything will be okay when our favorite tyrant comes and takes over from everyone else, and then we'll be proved right and everything will be fine. Like, that
You'll find
narrative
out when you
is just a
die.
little, well, I know, but it's also the crying out for the good tyrant to come and take over and take away all of everybody else's freedom so that we can be proved right. Like, that's what has made a lot of the evangelicals latch on to Trump. They've built up this mythology of how oppressed they are because nobody's respecting their whatever, and then they end up worshiping the Antichrist. Seriously, my great
Probably.
aunt saved like coins against the time of the Antichrist, and my mother's like, I kind of feel like she's totally over this whole magic thinking apocalypse shit. She's like, I kind of feel like she was almost right. Except the evangelicals are worshiping him, and my mother's in no way cool with any of that. But like, oh my God.
It's interesting that almost all of us on this panel, I think Lawrence is the only exception, that almost everybody here came from a religious background, but where like Lilith and Kip come from the evangelical, like creationist Christian kind of thing. We've got Tomer and Isaac who come from a Jewish background, and all of the instruction in the Bible that comes along with that. And they Tomer, were you ever religious?
No, I was
No.
erratic, but just like, no, not really religious, just following tradition, I guess.
In
Okay,
that
so Lawrence
cultural,
and
religious,
Tomer,
not true believer vibe.
Lawrence and
Yeah.
Tomer were lucky enough to never be believers.
Wait,
I was-
that I was a believer.
You told me you never were.
No, I
thought.
didn't say that ever. No.
Well, I apologize. I really thought that you said that you were never a believer. My
No,
apologies.
I grew up Jewish, and there were definitely points in my childhood where I was like, I thought that like, God. There was a point in my youth where I thought that God had even saved my household, and upon learning more about science, I was like, oh, that makes way more sense than a deity. But yeah, no,
Okay.
I grew up Jewish. I was doing all the Passover stuff. I wasn't religious by the time that I would have had my bar mitzvah, so I never had a bar mitzvah because by that time I wasn't religious. But yeah,
Okay.
I still grew up.
So
Very
you
much
were an
Jewish.
atheist young, but you were not lifelong like Tomer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I envy people who never had religious belief, but where most of like in the United States, most of us speak about our religious background. It's the Christian aspect. It's more like where Lilith and Kip are coming from. However, I'm the odd one out because there was a time when I honestly believed a lot of horse shit too, but it wasn't Christian horse shit. It was neo-pagan, like if I don't even know how people could understand, because I was a child in Los Angeles in the 70s, man, and it's like a completely different vibe.
That is the different vibe. I can respect that is a wildly different vibe. but I will say, as much as I resent a lot of things that I was lied to about, and I resent the impact that a lot of those beliefs had on my life. I can also appreciate that having clawed my way out of some really fucked up beliefs and having had the courage to face the possibility that this thing I had invested so much of myself in was in fact absolute bullshit, which takes a tremendous amount of courage. I
Yeah.
like I feel like I can at least relate to people who are struggling with these things and be like, yeah, it absolutely is as big a deal as you think. And it's okay that you're freaking out. Also, there's life on the other side.
And you are coming from a background where there's millions of people who share the belief that you held. So you're
Mhm.
having to fight against millions of people. I was
Mhm.
the odd one out. I had my own personal view of like reincarnation and all of that shit because I was a Los Angeles hippie in the 70s, and I'm coming out of that background. So I have no I don't have millions of people who believe like I do. I didn't believe like anybody. So it was a lot
The
easier for me.
hippies are eclectic. It's true. Nobody told you you were the devil when you changed your mind, I'm assuming.
Well, actually, that did happen a lot. Yeah.
Mm.
I wanted to pull
At
this
least it
back a
wasn't
bit
your spouse?
to Isaac's comment, because as like from a Christian perspective, the interpretation of this psalm tends to be in that direction as well, right? That these are human judges, and the reason for that is because this is the way that Jesus interprets this text. It's interesting to me because what this suggests is that this is actually a very old perspective of the text. I mean, it's something that the New Testament writers are writing about already in the first century CE, and probably drawing from a circulating Jewish interpretation of the text that then survives right into traditional rabbinic Judaism, which I think is like I said, interesting, clearly wrong, but also very interesting, and one of the ways in which they're sort of grappling with the currency of the text and um perspectives, cosmological perspectives that are um on like still in force within Judaism, because we can
Mm.
see in the Dead Sea Scrolls an entirely completely different perspective of this, where yeah, uh the Yahweh is a God who stands up in the court of El. Like this is still a current perspective within another segment of Judaism that we can observe. So it's neat because it kind of shows the antiquity of that perspective, and it shows too just the the heterogeneity of
Mhm.
of Jewish belief and practice at the time, as well. So I don't know. I did Tomer, like at the end there in verse 8. I heard you mention that this is, or commenters talk about how this is sort of the pronouncement by the psalmist.
Yeah,
I think I do.
yeah, like Steinsaltz, for example, it literally what he does is he does like the translation with commentary like in line. So it's like the
Yeah,
psalmist, disillusioned, closes with a plea to God: "Arise, reveal yourself,
yeah.
God, and judge the earth yourself. Israelite and gentle alike, for you possess all nations."
Yeah. I've seen some one or two. I think Mark Smith actually takes this. What?
Sorry. Just
What?
no, there is the punk singer Mark E. Smith. So this is my head is like,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
that's the guy. Marcus. Yeah,
So
then it's Marcus Smith.
that's funny. Yeah, Mark S. Smith. I believe this is something that he's proposed as well. Is that concluding statement at the end might actually be L's pronouncement on the drama, right? Yahweh comes in with his charge and says, this is what's going to happen. And L's pronouncement is, yeah, okay, here you go. You're in charge now. This is you go, you judge.
See you, losers. I'm going to Cabo.
Yeah. So
this is like, this is coming from a time period when people were like, these other gods existed, including El, separate from Yahweh.
This
and Yahweh
is
was
something,
given possession of all the nations.
Yeah. And something that I talk about when in I might get around to writing a paper about this at some point, because I think it's interesting. When you go to texts like in Daniel chapter 7 or in 11Q13, the Melchizedek scroll, I think there's a case to be made that in the minds of these writers, the God of Israel is more appropriately still El and Yahweh, but as like that they were still viewed as distinct, but oversaw the welfare of the nation, were properly the true God, without all the monotheistic trappings of that. So I it in some of these texts, like in the text in Daniel, there's a few places where commenters have suggested that the terminology being used could function. They're plural terms with reference to the gods, but the way that they're used could reflect this plurality of majesty idea as a way of elevating a single deity as like the supreme being of all, but it works in the other direction too, where this could actually just be with reference to these two gods working together in the view and in the imagination of certainly some Second Temple Jews.
So by the time of Jesus, would this idea have been put to bed, or is it possible, for example, that the dynamic?
Like I was just going to say, in fact, you have scholars like Dan McClellan who will say there is just no monotheism in the Bible at all, including the New Testament. So, and it's I would say that that's not where I'm at, but I'm close to that, in the sense that I think it probably was a prominent view, and maybe even the prominent view at the time of Jesus, that there were multiple gods.
Is it possible that this dynamic of Yahweh and El, kind of like the Father God and the Son God, God the Father, God the Son sort of dynamic, and then also like everyone's kind of moving towards strict monotheism, could that have influenced like Christianity being like there's only one God, but there's actually a Father and a Son at the same time?
I think so, but probably at a later point, right? I think at the time when the New Testament texts are being written, it's more likely that the way this God the Father, God the Son imagery works is more closely in line with what we see within Second Temple Judaism, right? Where Jesus, as the Son of God, is a divine being, not the divine being.
Yeah,
right.
That's you could look at the John 1, right?
Yep.
the thing, it doesn't include the article in some of those cases.
Yep.
So it has been argued, even I think Origen actually initially argued this, that like the church father Origen initially
But the
argued
arguments
that
about Jesus and Trinitarianism, that one, sorry, you should finish. But yeah, Origin?
even his idea was like, well, no, it doesn't say that the word was God. It says that the word was a divine
A
being.
divine being.
Yeah. But also I recommend everyone read Charles Gieshen's work, Angelomorphic Christology. He talks about how a lot of the parts of God, a lot of the ways that he manifests, kind of initially became their own things, and then they were later I guess that's the best term you could use for it is hypostasis, but it's not quite right, because there's a lot of connotations to hypostasis. So they essentially, like the name of God, for example, was like a way that God would manifest to people,
Mhm.
and this kind of theology would give way to Trinitarianism. But I think it was also based on a lot of Hellenistic philosophy. I mean, we
Yeah.
can take a look at the precursors in Philo, for example.
Yep.
So the door was open to Trinitarian thought pretty early
It
on.
was open, but it's still, I do just still want to go back to the point I was going to make, because the issue of Trinitarianism and whether the glory of the persons of God is in fact an equal thing, or whether, I mean, John Calvin, Protestant Reformation, he burned Servetus at the stake because he said Jesus was the eternal Son of God, and Servetus said that Jesus was the Son of the eternal God. As you know, but didn't give him co-equal status with the Father.
Right, yeah.
Like
that would be like, of course, the later Trinitarian arguments.
Yeah, I'm just saying the whole issue has always been convoluted. It has always been a matter of multiple opinions. And the idea of the Trinity being, is never was as set and clear as Protestants like to pretend today.
To Lawrence's point, though, as well, we can just return to like the text of this actual psalm. The word Elohim, which we translate as God, and as overwhelmingly with reference to Yahweh, the God of Israel, is more likely properly understood as like a generic term, with reference to just an unspecified divine being. It's used probably by the priestly writer and then by biblical writers following in that tradition as a way of avoiding the name Yahweh. That's possible, but within this psalm itself, it's interesting, right? It starts off with a God, Elohim, indefinite, takes a stand in the Council of El, in the presence of the Elohim, right? Like that's a definite expression there when it's in construct. So it's still it is it's doing the same thing as what you see in John 1:1 later on. I have said, or I will I say, Elohim, gods, you are, where it's clearly functioning as the plural with direction to the other members of the council that are of the same quality, right? The same status. And then at the end there, the pronouncement, rise up, Elohim, again directed to the speaker, to the what's undoubtedly the Yahweh figure here, right? But unspecified.
You kind of just look at like the verbs or the word or the other words around it to kind of tell you if it's giving a singular or a
Yep.
plural meaning so, in the beginning and the end, it's very singular. You have, he is standing, is singular, and stand, that's the singular form of the command to stand. But then, like, yeah, as you say, like, I say to you are gods, like it's literally the plural you.
Plural. Yep.
And also also you got like the sons of Elyon right after that. Yeah, I mean, among the Elohim, yeah, as you said, it makes it the Elohim, but it still could be. It sounds weird to say among, I guess, a singular, so it makes sense to be plural in this case.
Hmm.
And then obviously the next verse already is addressing the Elohim
That group.
as a
Yep.
plural. So
Yeah.
but it's interesting that the whole verse the whole psalm uses Elohim for both the singular God and
Yeah.
the
It-
assembly
yeah.
that he's in.
Yeah, it's I don't know if Dan
Very,
McClellan is
very
right, but
sneaky.
there's a hell of a lot less monotheism than I was taught to believe in the Bible.
No, without question. Without question.
Really.
That's yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe not none, but damn.
I'm going to interrupt this meaningless scholarly banter with an important comment. The knights who say knee offer $4.99 and say, "Why does Kent Hovind sound like Muggsy the gangster from Looney Tunes?" Just an observation. Keep telling him like it is, Aram.
I'm guessing he would like to sound cool because he's a narcissistic idiot. And that's probably the last cool thing he managed to pull off was a Muggsy impression when he was 8.
I'm gonna have to run, but it
Happy
was
to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
fun to pop in for this. So cool. All right.
Yeah,
Take
I'm
care,
glad
guys.
you did.
Thanks, Kip.
Bye.
All right.
Well, we can't do just 2 psalms, and
Like we did in Psalms 22 and 23.
Sometimes we can. All right, but let's continue, and I will
Yes.
I will read Psalm 83. A song, a psalm of Asaph. O God, do not keep silent. Do not hold your peace or be still, O God. Even now your enemies are in tumult. Those who hate you have raised their heads. They lay crafty plans against your people. They consult together against those you protect. They say, "Come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more." They conspire with one accord. Against you they make a covenant. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also has joined them. They are the strong arm of the children of Lot, Selah. Do to them as you did to Midian, as to Sisera and Yabin at the Wadi Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor, who became dung for the ground. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, all their princes like Zebah
Zeph.
and Zalmunna, who said, "Let us take the pastures of God for our own possession." Oh my God, make them like whirling dust, like chaff before the wind. As fire consumes the forest, as the flame sets the mountains ablaze, so pursue them with your tempest, and terrify them with your hurricane. Fill their faces with shame, so that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be put to shame and dismayed forever. Let them perish in disgrace. Let them know that you alone, whose name is the Lord, are the most high over all the earth. So kind of taking
every single bit of that just sounds like crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women.
it's exactly that, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
now I did like there was all back that we heard about before, but
Yeah.
the having the nations, the traditional enemies of Israel, called the strong arm of the children of Lot. the at least kind of like the warrior class of the children of Lot.
Yeah,
Was
it's
interesting
confused.
to me.
It is interesting with that one because it comes after it talks about Ashur, but the sons of
Mhm.
Lot should be the Moabites and the Ammonites
Right. Yeah.
specifically. Yeah.
So it is interesting, but I guess from their point of view, they had maybe longer conflicts with Edom and Moab. So the places like Assyria were just seen to join them later.
Yeah. that makes
So they were seen as like a secondary problem at this point maybe. Uh, but
Yeah, they don't have an etiology creation myth for where the Assyrians came from. They're
right,
just
yeah,
they came later.
right.
Maybe
They were
they're
just like
descended from
around.
the Ammonites,
Yeah.
They're the
The
invading assholes. These are our cousins, so we have real deep beef with them, kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
although I do want to note kind of the importance here of some of this language. So God is to make them like chaff before the wind, but also uh God's enemies here are said to lay crafty plans against the people. And to me, this kind of speaks, even though it doesn't use wicked per se, it does, however, uh, like it doesn't use like Reshaim, for example. But I think that some of their phrasing does point to that. Some of which I just mentioned. Um, so the we could potentially be viewing this as a hint to who the wicked are, and that would be these other nations potentially.
Mm.
I mean, sometimes, or they're rulers or gods who have been ignoring or perverting justice. I
Yeah, I
just
feel I
sometimes I
mean like
wonder
the
how
enemies
much.
is
Well, that's following from the last, psalm, but I don't know. How much of religion I wonder how much of it by like percentage historically has just been revenge fantasies. Because there's a lot of that in the Psalms.
Probably a lot of them.
Yeah, I was also wondering if maybe Psalm 83 is placed after Psalm 82 as a sort of like retcon, because the last verse is, oh yeah, you, Yahweh specifically, not Elohim, you are Elyon, you are the Most High. I wonder if that's kind of like them. Oh, 82 is kind of problematic. People might think that they're two different people, they're two different gods.
You think they
And
were
then
doing a
83
fix it?
then it's like, yeah.
Although
I could see it.
I did I should note this, right? Now that I'm thinking about what I said before, the fact that the other descriptions of the wicked, for example, were like, they were members of the community, and these are explicitly outsiders. So maybe they're just talking about them in the same way and not exactly the same group.
Yeah. I mean, there are two different kinds of criticism that go on. There's the evil outsiders who are oppressing us, and then there are the evil judges who are pretending to be righteous and following the word of God, except they're actually oppressing us.
Yeah, you have the foreign
Enemies, foreign and
and the
domestic.
local ones. Yeah.
You always have longer history and beef with your family enemies than you do with outsiders.
Mm. And also, I mean,
Okay,
like,
sorry.
enemy nations are probably more like they're the enemy, they hate us and we hate them. But then, like, the Rashayim are supposed to be like the rich are supposed to, commanded to look after the poor and whatnot. And then they're
Or
being evil by.
there are more people who like they say nice things, but they're actually dicks, and
Yeah.
they're two-faced.
Yeah.
Are you telling
That's-
me that two-faced people have ended up in positions of power taking advantage of others forever?
Yeah. It's a new revelation I just came up with. It's a brand new idea. No one's ever thought of it or considered it.
Yeah, this is something I learned from my dad. I got to hear him talk really nicely to some of his friends, and then as soon as they left, he started talking shit like he absolutely hated those people. And
Hmm.
that so disappointed me in my father that if I've got something negative to say about you, I've probably already said it to you.
That's true. I mean, there are people I don't bother with because I, one, don't respect them enough to think that they would either listen to or benefit from my opinion. And two, I just cannot be arsed to go round the mulberry bush with an absolute fool. So I might social niceties and duck out because fuck it. I ain't got time for this. Um,
I've had people, address me abruptly to my face with harsh criticisms, and I find that I respect that.
well, yes,
Just
but you have integrity, Aaron. Not all the people I don't like have integrity. In fact,
Alira
most
the
of them are
Free,
quite devoid of it.
Alira the Free sent 50 RN Raw gift memberships, and Peter says we're up to 150 now.
Woo!
Okay, so I'll start with the overview. So, Psalms 83 is generally described as a national lament, and commentators generally divide the psalm into two sections: verses 1 through 8 as a plea to God, and verses 9 through 18 as petitions for God to act. The dating of Psalms 83 is mostly determined by scholars based on verses 6 through 8, which is 7 through 9. Klaus writes, quote, "It is amazing to note the confidence with which the commentators believe that they can identify this historical situation, quote unquote, discernible from verses 6 through 8, with definite dates in the history of Israel," end quote. He notes that Kittel declared that Psalms 83, quote, "almost surely is to be equated with the events to be gleaned from 1 Maccabees 5. Ewald and Briggs thought of hostile attacks that Nehemiah suffered in Nehemiah 4. Gunkel assumed an unknown situation of the time between Ezra and Alexander the Great. He writes that in all these interpretations is the effort to explain or reinterpret the mention of Assyria in verse 8, which is 9. He writes, however, that the information one gets from the commentaries is very problematical. He suggested that the list of nations in verses 6 through 8, which is 7 through 9, was poetically and freely composed, quote unquote, with the prophetic singer viewing an assault of nations, quote unquote, in a vision, and authenticates the same with an array of specific names. Likewise, Tate writes that the fact that there are 10 nations named supports the conclusion that we are dealing with a stereotypical list, and such a large coalition of nations in alliance against Israel is both unknown and improbable. He writes that if Assyria, in verse 8, is taken as a direct historical reference, contemporary with the composition of the psalm, then it would point to a date between 9th and through 7th century BCE. He writes that most likely, however, is that Assyria is mentioned as an example of one of the great world powers allied with the small states around Israel. He notes that it is strange that Egypt and Babylon are not mentioned, but Ezra 6:22 provides some evidence of Assyria as stereotype reference to a foreign power. Gerstenberger suggested that the historical references are synthesis of oral and written tradition as it came down to the exilic and post-exilic age. He writes that general fear of suffering, terminal persecution, and concentration of Yahweh as the only way of survival fit with the localization indicated. He writes that in those days of pressure, community worship, also because of its defensive capacities through enemy imprecation, became the salvation experience par excellence. Zenger writes that the mention of Assyria as the dominant power instead of Egypt or Babylon suggests a pre-exilic dating, possibly the second half of the 8th century BCE, and maybe even before 722. But the fact that the psalm present Israel as both a theological entity in verse 4 and as a political or state reality, quote-unquote, in verse 5, that was existentially threatened, suggests a late pre-exilic or exilic origin of the psalm. And so northern origin would refer to Bethel or Mitzpah rather than the northern kingdom, where other new political and religious centers were arising alongside Jerusalem. The psalm then requires its final form only in the post-exilic period, in the context of the formation of the Asaph collection. That's it.
All right. So are we going on to Psalm 84 then?
Yes, I think Isaac.
Yep, I think that's Isaac.
Yeah. Though I will likely have to duck out after it because I have an appointment at 11:30. So
Then we should have her read.
Well,
no,
she,
I did
she
just
read
read.
it.
I
She already
read. I
read.
read 82.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry.
Wow,
So,
Aaron wanting
84?
to do women to do twice the work. Wow.
Wait, am I doing 84?
84.
84.
84.
Yeah. When I think.
That's an 8 followed
Of
by a
course.
4.
For the leader on the Gittith of the Korahites, a psalm. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. I long, I yearn for the courts of the Lord. My body and soul shout for joy to the living God.
I bet they are.
Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, in which to set her young. Near your altar, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They forever praise you, Selah. Happy is the man who finds refuge in you, whose mind is on the highways. They pass through the valley of Baca, regarding it as a place of springs, as if the early rain had covered it with blessing. They go from rampart to rampart, appearing before God in Zion. O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Selah. O God, behold our shield. Look upon the face of your anointed. Better one day in your courts than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather stand at the threshold of God's house than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is sun and shield. The Lord bestows grace and glory. He does not withhold his bounty from those who live without blame. O Lord of hosts, happy is the man who trusts in you. Oh, and then the previous verse, God is sun and shield. It's sun, S-U-N, not S-O-N.
Okay, fair enough. Oh,
And I think
Another
in
translation
that,
of the word that's translated as sun, it could be a bulwark.
yeah,
Oh.
I would think
Right.
that this that specifically refers to he is the that he gives life and sustains it.
Yeah, a source of
enough.
light and strength.
Yeah, but aside from that note, I did like in verse 7 there, the God of gods will be seen in Zion. I didn't check the Hebrew on that. Is that again Elohim or something like that?
Which one?
The
That's
God of
verse
gods.
7.
Seven.
I didn't actually check the Hebrew.
Verse
Elohim
7?
B'Tzion. 8, which in the Masoretic text 8.
Okay.
Oh,
Gotcha.
Elohim. Yeah, but see.
El Elohim, yes. Yireh El Elohim B'Tzion. But
Gotcha.
El means before, like appearing
Yeah,
before
yeah,
God.
yeah,
It's
yeah. El just means it's just
Yeah.
like two. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, it is we again have the reference to God residing in Zion. His home, that's where he's made his footstool, right? Place for his presence, for his statue. Excuse me.
Which is not an idol at all.
Definitely
Golden,
not an idol.
golden
I
statue.
wonder why the TV show Lucifer kept referring to heaven as the silver city and not as Zion.
Eh,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, Zion would
It
be
was a
Jerusalem, more
better-
like the physical,
Ah.
like God's place on earth.
mythical
and the-
universe.
And I don't know why
Oh,
you
it
would
should-
call heaven the silver city, but yeah, I don't know where that comes from.
It,
Is that
it
a
should be
Christian
interesting.
thing?
It should be interesting to note that the Septuagint has El Elohim as God of gods. You know.
Okay.
Bad translation.
So Elohim is the God that gods worship.
Pretty much.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is the idea. That's kind of what we were mentioning before in Psalm 82, that like the other gods were subordinate to this one.
Yeah, he's the one who climbed up to the top of the jungle gym and so now he's in charge and he's the king of the hill.
Oh yeah. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, the God of gods in Zion. Interesting.
I mean, it could be a bad translation, or it could be that the Septuagint is keeping, what's the word? It is keeping an older version, and the Masoret text, the one that's been changed to remove the reference to God of gods. Even though I'm sure that expression is used elsewhere.
They will go from
Tomer, in modern
power to
Hebrew
power.
is Michael El Choil. I guess you wouldn't pronounce it that way. Michael El Chayil. Is that used in modern
wait,
Hebrew as like an expression
in-
of from strength to strength?
Wait, in what verse?
It's also in that verse. Michael
verse?
El Chayil.
Chail. Michael el Chail. No, I don't know. I know. I like probably there
I
is
guess
like
it's a more
a bit sophisticated, but like it's not really a common thing. I don't know.
yeah, maybe it's like I don't know, maybe it's a religious thing, or maybe specifically a Hubbard thing to say, like, you know, like it's a way of saying from strength to strength. They'd say Michael El Choil sort of thing.
Yeah, possibly.
Which
Okay.
apparently JPS translates as from rampart to rampart,
Mm-hmm.
rather than from success to another, which is what Steinzel says.
Yeah, I mean Michel el Chel, from rampart to rampart. That's if that's how we pronounce it. It's pronounced maybe. Yeah, but like it seems like Chayil it refers to strength. So yeah, they go from strength to strength. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not bragging at all.
Okay, so Psalms 84 is the first psalm of the second collection of Korahite psalms, 84, 85, 87, and 88. With the first collection being Psalms 42, 44 through 49. Tate notes that the psalm is usually described as a hymn which expresses devotion to the temple in Jerusalem. Movinkolt included it with the hymns of praise, but says that Yahweh is praised more indirectly by exalting all that belongs to him. His temple, his holy city, and the blessings which flow from the place where the fountain of life is, and where strength is to be found. While Zenger notes that Schmidt understood the psalm as a liturgy at the temple portal, quote unquote, he instead favors Psalms 84 as a prayer of lament far from the temple, or temple piety. He adds that scholars have repeatedly suggested that the final form of the psalm as we have it is not original, and that the so-called royal petition in verses 9 and 10 is seen by many interpreters as problematic. Gerstenberger notes that the mere appearance of a royal figure in the psalm would seem to point to a Jerusalemite and pre-exilic period, and considering that Zion was made the state sanctuary as early as in Davidic times, seen in 2 Samuel 5 and 6. The early dating of the psalm is apparently undergirded and upheld by some interpreters, like Galder and Sebold. On the other hand, several weighty arguments testify in favor of a late exilic or post-exilic origin in Psalms 84. He writes that the formation of individual piety within the community of Yahweh believers, as witnessed by Psalms 84, is in itself a sure sign of exilic and post-exilic developments. Moreover, the resurgence of hope for a Davidic restoration and a perfect messianic kingdom can be observed in many late Old Testament texts, such as Isaiah 9, 5 and 6, which is 6 and 7, 11, 1 through 9, Ezekiel 34, and Psalms 2 and 110. And Tate comments, quote, "It is possible that Psalms 84 did originate from circles of priests at the sanctuary at Dan, but the present psalm is clearly a Zion psalm, more probably from Jerusalem, and must be dealt with on that basis. Also, regardless of the original date and context of the psalm, the present psalm is, quote, a timeless expression of the ultimate satisfaction of pilgrimage and the privilege of worship," end quote, according to Rogerson and McKay. Indeed, a pre-exilic date for the psalm is by no means certain, and the present psalm may represent post-exilic piety. Kisane proposes to read the psalm in the context of the Babylonian exile, treating the, quote, supposed description of a toilsome journey to Jerusalem, end quote, in verses 7 and 8, as a figurative description of the present distress of the exiles, and anticipation of a change of the arid desert-like conditions of life into future glory, similar to Isaiah 35, 51:3, and 58:11. I do not care to spiritualize verses 7 and 8 to this extent, and Kisane's translation of Et Mizbachotecha as in your altars, equivalent to in the ruins of the temples in the destroyed temple, seems improbable. But its meaning does caution us against trying to read the psalm in a tightly restricted context. We simply do not know its date or precise originated context.
And we have My Unfinished Sock says, don't wake up halfway through the stream. Like and share the stream instead. Hurries to share the stream. I think there's a confession hidden in there. Illyra the Free sent
Oh,
50
well, it's not our usual time.
Illyra the Free sent 50 RN Raw gift memberships, making it 200. Thanks again very much. Then Illyra the Free says, this one is for our lovely and dark goddess of wine.
Ooh.
And then the Knights Who Say Knee offers
It's me.
$1.99.
I'm the lovely and dark goddess of wine. Thank you,
Honey, we
Illyra.
all know I am the god of tits and wine.
There can be two.
Oh, sweetheart. I will
The
allow
Knights-
you to serve me.
The Knights Who Say
Anyway.
Knee offer $1.99
God damn
and
it.
says, sorry, Rocky, not Muggsy. LOL.
By serve me, I mean I will permit him to bring me wine. Don't worry.
God damn it.
Lilith. When Lord says wine, he means wine with an H.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm sure he can take care of that. He has plenty of experience.
True. Yeah, I cry all the time. I cry myself to sleep every night.
And I sleep soundly on a bed of oiled, writhing virgins.
Sounds hot.
You just sleep down. Your bed is made of virgins. Damn.
Now Lord isn't going to sleep for a month.
And on that lovely note, I adore you all. I'm going to go get a tattoo. So, mwah. I will see you
do that.
Saturday. Love,
And
love.
remember to share it in the Discord.
I should definitely do that. Well, I don't know if we'll get it all done today because I have scheduling. It doesn't matter. I will share the finished product when it's done. Love you all. Mwah.
That's it.
Okay, so I'll do 85.
Yeah, I suppose that's fine.
Yep.
Okay. For the leader of the Korahites, a psalm. O Lord, you will favor your land, restore Jacob's fortune. You will forgive your people's iniquity, pardon all the sins, Selah. You will withdraw all your anger, turn away from your rage. Turn again, O God, our helper, revoke your displeasure with us. Will you be angry with us forever, prolong your wrath for all generations? Surely you will revive us again, so that your people may rejoice in you. Show us, O Lord, your faithfulness. Grant us in your deliverance. Let me hear what God the Lord will speak. He will promise well-being to his people, his faithful ones. May they not turn to folly. His help is very near those who fear him, to make his glory dwell in our land. Faithfulness and truth meet, justice and well-being kiss. Truth springs up from the earth, justice looks down from heaven. The Lord also bestows his bounty, our land yields its produce. Justice goes before him as he sets out on his way.
So I did have a question there. So are you using JPS, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Okay. So the NRSV UE in verses 1 through 3 uses a lot of past tense verbs, like you forgave the iniquity of the people, you pardoned all their sin. Yeah, what's because yours had the was it the future?
Yeah, it was the future JPS, and it is read in past tense. Ratzita, shavta, nasata, kisita. It's all like it's all past tense.
Okay. It's an interesting.
But
yeah, so why do they translate it that way?
Yeah, a good
I
question.
mean, they have or have forgiven. I mean, there are instances where the past can refer to the future.
Well, I mean, you have to remember that, like, in biblical Hebrew, you don't really have strict tense, past, present. It's more of like a, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like imperfect and perfect.
Sure, yeah.
And it's kind of more like something that's been completed. So you can talk about the future, but use past tense.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because you're talking about a completed action, sort of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
And apparently people do it in modern Hebrew as well. They'll, if you're giving directions to someone, you might say something like, you will do this, you will do that, and then you'll be there. If that makes sense.
Okay. Gotcha.
But yeah.
So yeah, I guess from my reading, it seemed like, so the first part would be like acknowledging that, God in the past had, done so many things with people. He forgave them, pardoned them, restored them. But then in the rest of it, which I think, I guess to me, having it be past tense in English would make more sense, because there is the, he's asking, restore us again. Although I don't know if that's another translation issue. I don't know if that's...
I mean, literally in JPS, like every time it uses will, oh Lord, you will favor your land. Every time it says that, it literally has a note that says, or have favored. For example.
Gotcha. Okay.
Will forgive.
Fair
or
enough.
have forgiven. Yeah.
So when it says restore us again, because to me that's like, okay, this is like a new situation. So I could see this being, a lot of this stuff is very much like what they were saying during like the exile, right? Like, will you be angry with us forever? That kind of stuff. That's very much during a time, at least similar to that kind of strife. So to me, it would make more sense of like, oh, you did this once before, please do it again. But aside from that, I did notice here, so in verse 9, there's the hope that God's glory, his kavod, may dwell in the land once again. But it is very interesting how it's portrayed, because it seems like with that, in this psalm, it comes with peace and prosperity. And the way that the kavod usually is it's very catastrophic, at least for a little bit when it shows up. Like the hope is that it would eventually lead to those things, but like when like God's kavod is like in the storm cloud or whatever, but I guess you could also argue that like if his presence is like, on the ark or something like that, or if his resting place is in like the temple, then I could also see that that interpretation, that with his presence, with his glory, comes the peace and prosperity.
I should note Tate's opinion here, that it does not seem necessary to treat the perfects in verses 2 through 4 as prophetic with a future eschatological force, or as precative prefects.
Predicate?
No, precative.
Precative?
Yes. Let me just check real quick. Even Merriam-Webster doesn't have a pronunciation of it.
Expressing a wish request. Okay.
Yeah. What was I? Yes. Or as precative perfect with imperative force, or as characteristic perfect, as in JB. It seems, and it quotes from... Is it quoting from? No, it doesn't.
So that's probably how you'd be pronouncing it.
Precative, yeah. So it seems to me that it is better to understand the perfect in verses 2 through 4 as expressing simple past tense, without fixing the historical context too tightly. The original composition and use of the psalm may have been much earlier, with a primary reference of the language of verses 2 through 4 to the events of the Exodus from Egypt and the wilderness wanderings, but its present role in the Psalter reflects post-exilic experience. The exile and the return of some exiles were experiences of a peace with Yahweh's saving acts in earlier history. Psalm 85, of course, is concerned with the extension of those saving works into the future. All right, now there is a comment.
My unfinished journey says, hail Aaron and panel, and hail getting off work at 2:15 a.m.
See, I where I work, we close at 2:30 a.m. I'll be lucky if I get to leave at 2:15.
Where I work, I get calls in the
Like
middle of the night from a guy that I host streams for.
Yeah, who is that guy?
Yeah. We shall not.
Some schmuck, I bet.
Yeah. I think he's from Texas. Time doesn't exist.
It's your fault for living in Europe.
Even the nights are longer in Texas.
Okay, so Psalms 85 is taken to be a communal complaint, according to Gerstenberger, or a prayer for the favor and saving work of Yahweh, according to Tate. Zenger writes that the psalm reminds God of the great promises he has given of the end time, ultimate restoration of Israel as the first fruits of the successful relationship with God. He writes that from this standpoint, Psalms 85 can be regarded as a prophetic liturgy, quote-unquote. However, since the cult prophecy hypothesis, quote-unquote, as a whole is problematic, he writes that it is better to understand the psalm as, quote, a prayerful assurance of Yahweh's mighty promises of salvation, end quote, which works with the stylistic tools of direct address to God. Regarding the dating, scholars almost unanimously take Psalms 85 to be post-exilic. Tate notes that Mowinckel argued that Psalms 85, together with 1 to 6, is a prayer for peace and a happy new year, which belong to harvest and new year celebrations. Weiser argued that the scene in Psalms 85 is, quote, probably that of a service of supplication of the cult community, held within the framework of the festival cult, end quote, and assigns a pre-exilic date to the composition of the psalm. Many commentators, however, take the psalm to be post-exilic. Kisane argued that the psalm, quote, is a message of hope to the returned exiles who during the early years after the return from exile were discouraged because their condition fell far short of the glorious and happy state which had been foretold by the prophets, end quote. Tate writes that while the original composition and use of the psalm may have been much earlier, with a primary reference of the language of verses 2 through 4 to the events of the Exodus from Egypt and the wilderness wanderings, its present role in the Psalter reflects post-exilic experience. Terrian writes that the psalm is post-exilic, at the beginning of the Persian domination of the ancient Near East. And Goldingay writes that the situation of the people in the late 6th century would be a suitable one against which to imagine the psalm being used, insofar as then too Israel protested at Yahweh's continued anger. Zenger writes that the emphatic reference of the psalm to exilic or post-exilic texts favors a dating of the psalm in the early post-exilic period. And Gerstenberger writes that the community behind the psalm, which is portrayed as being dedicated loyally to Yahweh, hearkening to the past and probably to scripture in order to recognize the will of its God, and pleading for his sustained help, point to the worship of early Jewish congregation in the 6th or 5th century BCE as the original setting. Krauss writes that Psalms 86 is post-exilic, looking back to the great salvific deeds of Yahweh it refers to, not to the primeval or primarily historical evidences of the power of God, but to the liberation from exile. That's it.
All right. Unfortunately, I think we got to call it here. I know we didn't get very far, but hey, we talked about a fucking awesome psalm. Talked about Psalm 82, which has obviously the coolest stuff. So I think we explored it to a very sufficient degree. But I do have quite a few things to do today.
Yeah, I get you, as I do as well. So are we meeting on Saturday?
Yes, we will.
I'm fine
Although
with that, yeah.
Though I will say that next Saturday I also have a thing to do, aka a party. So yeah.
That would
Okay,
be
so
not
are we-
next
are we
Saturday,
doing
but
80
the Saturday after next Saturday.
The Saturday after it next.
So you're good for this coming
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yes,
And we're
I'm
going
good
to be
for this
doing
coming
Psalm
Saturday.
85?
86.
86.
It.
Okay. All right. And let's see, what is it? Okay, 13. All right. All right. And then we're going to have to skip next. Are we doing a weekday? Well, no, I don't think I can because I'm flying this week. So
Yeah, we can do a week off, and then do like Wednesday.
I have to go to
Saturday.
Sin City and hail Satan.
Nice. Although it is unfortunate that you didn't go there during WrestleMania. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I've been afforded very little time. I can't travel like I used to because there's stuff to take care of here at the house now, and I no longer have somebody that I can entrust to take care of everybody while I'm gone. So, yeah. But anyway,
That's end stage capitalism. Anyways, that's what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, like today, for example, I've got to feed 50 some odd snakes and a scorpion and a spider and a bird and some dogs. Yeah. Anyway, and some crabs and a number of other things.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, with nothing further to say.
Oh, don't you worry, Aaron. I got things to say.
Before you have something, something to say, you got a membership.
Oh, I got a membership?
Yes. Someone
Thank
gifted.
you, Alira. I'm guessing.
Someone gifted a few.
Very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, so Lawrence finally has something to, he has a gift membership. He can watch these videos and has something to fill up all these endless hours in which he has nothing to do.
Right, yeah.
Because that's where we're all at now.
Yep. Winning. Oh my fucking god. We live in a hellscape.
Thank you, Alira the Free, for yet another 50 RN Raw gift memberships, bringing us up to 250. And
make sure to join the Discord, the Behold Network Discord. There are no other Discords. That's the only one.
Which one?
The Behold Network Discord.
Behold!
Damn right. Even
All
got
right.
the Behold spray can in there.
All right, well, hasta la bye-bye.
Took my line.
Come here. Come here. Come on. Come on. You can do it.
What?
You can do it.
Do what?
Do the thing.
What thing?
Just say goodbye.